Hello, hello. Hello, everybody. My name is Jo, and it's really lovely to be here this morning. I hope you've all had an amazing morning so far, and you're not all boiling like I am. You may notice that my voice is slightly going, so if I start to whisper by the end of the talk, I'm really sorry. But it's super awesome to be in Bulgaria. It's really lovely to be speaking to you all today. My name is Jo Franchetti, and I am, knocking the adapter. Come back to us. Are we back? No? Oh, yeah. Hooray. There we go. Let's try that one again. I am a developer advocate at Samsung Internet. I have a load of PWA and Samsung Internet stickers up here, so if you'd like to come and get one afterwards and have a chat with me, that would be really lovely. If you don't know what a developer advocate is, well, my team gives talks and writes blogs and teaches other people how to use new web APIs and how to build great things for the web. We also contribute to open source, and we like to help out developers who are using new web tech. So if you've got a project that's using Web Bluetooth or Web VR or Web Payments, we would absolutely love to hear about it. Please come and tell me about it. We really want to help you to leave the web better than when you found it, to be the heroes of the web. And if you've not heard of Samsung Internet before, well, we are a web browser for Android devices. We're based off of Chromium, which is the same engine that Chrome is based off. But we've got some added extras like specific controls for ad blocking and for tracker blocking. And we try and turn on support for the things that really matter to you. So we love it when you feedback what it is that you want to see in the browser next. But we're not here to talk about Samsung Internet. We're here to talk about progressive web apps. So let's get started. I should start this off with a caveat that this whole talk is loosely based around a pun that I came up with while talking to my colleagues who also have quite brightly colored hair. And I said that we were kind of like the Power Rangers since we each had our own color. And then, since we advocate for PWAs, I came up with the idea of the PWA Rangers, and a whole theme was born. For those of you who maybe aren't as old as me and weren't watching Saturday morning TV in the early 2000s in the UK, the Power Rangers were a crime-fighting team of colorful superheroes who fight aliens with giant mechanical dinosaurs that could morph together. So I hope that's cleared everything up. So, on to being the heroes of the web. But first, we need to know what we're fighting for. As developers, as business owners, as anybody who has a product or a service or a brand, we want other people to use the things that we're building. We want their interaction with our products to be pleasant, and we want them to feel engaged enough to want to come back and continue to use these products. We want people to be able to find our content easily. The easier it is to find, the more people that you're going to reach. And we want people to save our content and take it with them, have it at their fingertips when they want it. And that means we're asking them to download something. And depending on what country they're in or what kind of contract they're on, we're also asking our users to spend sometimes a not insignificant amount of money to find, download, and use our products. Now, I'd like to show you this slide, which was from a talk by Bruce Lawson, who is at Bruce L on Twitter. I don't know how well you can see that data, but it shows how many hours people from different countries need to work in order to afford 500 meg of data. So down at the bottom there, we've got Germany with 1 hour. Then we've got the US at 5.7. South Africa, it takes 18 hours of work to afford 500 meg. And in Nigeria, it's 28.2 hours. In Brazil, it takes 34.4 hours, which is close to a week's worth of work just to afford 500 meg of data. Now, not only are these connections expensive, but they're often incredibly slow. Much of the world is not on the 3G connections that we're used to. They're on 2G or worse, dial-up. And if you're thinking, well, that's just developing countries, that's just China and India, I don't really care about them. Well, it's not the case. A lot of rural America is still on a 2G or a dial-up connection. These are millions of people that you're potentially not reaching if your app is too big. So it's super important that we keep the size of our products in mind when we're developing for the entire world. But we don't have to just keep the cost of data in consideration. We want our users to keep our content readily accessible, preferably on their devices, which means that we're asking our users to give us valuable space on their storage device. And many of these users don't have the latest iPhone or the latest Pixel or Samsung. They'll be using older and cheaper phones, less well-spec'd, with much less storage space. You're essentially asking your users to decide between saving your app and saving a photo album of pictures of their family, and that's a pretty big ask. And the tool that many companies are employing to help them in this quest for engagement and discoverability is an app. And there is quantitative proof that building an app can increase user engagement. Users spend the majority of the time on their phones in apps as opposed to in the browser. That's a really good article there, that link. I'll share the slides out later and you can read it if you want to see the numbers. And apps give us a reliable way to present this slick user experience without interruptions, no distractions, no browser Chrome or unrelated content, just the stuff that we want them to see. And writing a native app also gives you the opportunity to use device hardware and services. If you want to know the user's location, you can, with their permission, of course. Apps are also able to send notifications so that we can re-engage our users and send pertinent information. They're a direct line to the user that won't get caught in a spam filter or lost in an email inbox and will instantly re-engage them. And apps can work offline. And importantly, work in that most rage-inducing of conditions, Li-Fi, where you've got just a tiny bit of signal and you just want to check that one thing, and damn it, why is this thing taking so long to load? 71% of the world is still on 2G connections, 71%. There's a lot of people struggling to get data, which is skewed by the US and Europe. You know, we're used to our 3G connections. But we need to be making things that offer an offline experience or that work over a dodgy connection. And apps can store data readily to show you whatever the network connection. But of course, there are downsides to apps too. For starters, you need to actually build the app. And I'm making assumptions here, but I'm assuming most of us are web developers. So put your hands up if you can write HTML and CSS. That's pretty much the whole room. And who can write JavaScript? How about Java or C or C++? A lot fewer hands. So we need to learn a new language in order to build this app. But wait, we're going to learn this new language and then it's not going to work on every device. We have to learn another language as well. Now this is silly, I'll just pay somebody to write it for me. But wait, that costs quite a lot. And writing an app is expensive in dev time, in salaries, in support, and in testing, enough to make you consider just sticking to a website and forget about making an app entirely. And if you do decide to take on the cost of building an app, it's not a surefire thing that you're going to get the engagement that you were promised. Your app may never actually reach the devices of the public. Comscore did a survey and discovered that approximately 50% of mobile phone users download a total of 0 apps per month. When was the last time you downloaded an app? And for your potential users who are on an expensive data connection or don't have the most up-to-date phone, then they're not going to download your app if it's too big. Oh, there we go. The average Android app file size is 11.5 meg, and the average iOS app file size is 34.4 meg. These are huge. That's a huge amount of data that we're asking for our users to save on their phones. And our users won't use it. They'll go to our websites instead. If only there was a better way. If only there was some way to combine a website and an app. Enter the Progressive Web App. Progressive Web Apps can give us the reach of the web and the stickiness of an app. Mobile app report by Comscore says that the web reaches 3 times as many people as mobile apps, but once downloaded, people spend more time in the apps than in their browsers. Making a PWA means that you get the reach of those users who are browsing, but they can also save the website to their phone and have it right when they need it. Making a PWA also means that your app can be linkable. You can use a URL to send people directly there. And even though your users can come to your app from the web, once they visited it, the JavaScript service worker can cache data, meaning that they can use the site offline. PWAs are written in languages that we already know. With a few modifications, the websites that you've likely already built can be a PWA. And that's a lot of development time saved. But even though they're written in HTML, we can use a web app manifest to style how we want the browser to look. We can change its color, make it show a minimal interface, and even if preferred, we can make it hide the browser interface entirely, making your app full screen just like a native app. And progressive web apps are installable, but their size is much smaller than an app. We're talking a few kilobytes in comparison to the 30 meg sizes that we're seeing on iPhone apps. So once installed, the user will see your app's icon on their home screen alongside their other apps, and the PWA will display the same. As far as your user is concerned, it's just another app. And with new APIs constantly arriving in the browsers, we've got access to not all, but many of the services that native apps have. So what have we got here? We've got notifications, we've got location, we can use the camera and the audio, we can do face detection, Bluetooth, VR, data storage, motion detection, a whole load of things. So let's talk about how they work. Well, to be considered a progressive web app, first your website has to be progressive. It has to be built with the idea of progressive enhancement at its core. We want our apps to be able to work for all our users, regardless of the browser that they're using or the device that they're using. And it has to be responsive so that it'll fit in any form factor. We don't necessarily know what devices the user's going to be using. It has to be served over HTTPS. Using a secure connection will prevent man-in-the-middle attacks, where third parties can track and even alter your user's communication with the server. It has to have a web app manifest, which will lay out the rules for how you want your app to look in the browser, along with information like color schemes and your icon graphics for when they download to the home screen. And it has to have a service worker, which will be available for your which will be available over your secure connection. A service worker is a type of web worker. It's essentially a JavaScript file that runs separately from the main browser thread. So let's take a look at those last two, the web app manifest and the service worker. The manifest is what allows your users to download your web app to the home screen of their device. Creating a manifest and linking it to your page as straightforward processes is almost exactly the same as what you do with your CSS, except your rel attribute will say manifest rather than style sheet. You can call the manifest whenever you want, whatever you want. Most people call it manifest.json. And it's going to hold metadata about your app, which will define how you want your app to display. The best way to understand this for me is to look at some code. So let's take a look at a manifest. So this is an example manifest for a very important... Oh, I knocked it again. Apologies, everybody. So yes, as I was saying, this is the web app manifest for a very important app that I built called Biscuit Tinder, where you get to rate your favorite biscuits. So what have we got here? We've got, first of all, the name, which is what's going to show in the web app install banner. We've got a short name, which is what's going to be the text underneath the icon when the icon shows on your home screen. We've got a start URL, which is going to define how your app is launched. You could add a query string parameter to this start URL if you wanted to send your users exactly where you want them to be. You can set an icon, which is what's going to show on the home screen. And this is usually, we would usually set it as an array of different images, so we can go between 192 and 512 pixels. And, oh, sorry, you need to give at least 192 and 512 so that you can get your Android and your iPhone users. And when your PWA opens, the browser is going to show a splash screen with the icon image and the title. So the title is going to be the name. And whatever color you set as the background color is what color the background of that splash screen is going to be. You can set a theme color, which is going to be the color of the browser toolbar, and you can entirely hide the browser UI if you prefer by setting the display type to standalone. If you want to change the page orientation, you can do using the orientation option there, which can either be set to landscape or portrait. And if you want to manually verify that your web app manifest is set up correctly, you can use the manifest tab on the application panel of Chrome, which looks like this. And so you can see here for Biscuit Tinder that we've got all the manifest info that we just saw displayed here on the right. If you would like to rate your biscuits, you can do so at biscuittinder.glitch.me. So, right, let's talk about service workers next. So a service worker is a script that runs in the background. So it's a special kind of web worker. They don't run on the main thread. They also don't have access to the DOM, but instead communicate with the pages that they control via the post message interface. A nice example would be maybe giving an offline experience to your users when they lose connectivity for the Wi-Fi. So service workers can intercept network requests. They cache data using the cache API, and they retrieve resources from the cache using the fetch API. And they are also responsible for delivering push notifications. Service workers are what allow us to offer this offline experience by serving resources from the cache instead of the network when the network connection is down. So how do we use them? So in order to use a service worker on your site, the first thing you're going to want to do is check whether service worker is supported by the browser being used. They're not supported by all browsers, but the support is getting better. We'll have a look at that later. And you can do if service worker in Navigator to check support there. Then you need to register the service worker, which you will do in your page's JavaScript. And by registering it, what you're doing is you're telling the browser where that service worker file is and telling it to install the service worker from there. After the registration step is when you'll be able to actually use the service worker to cache your static assets. So if all the files are cached successfully, then the service worker becomes installed, and that is the install step. If any of the files fail to install, the install step will fail and the service worker won't move on to the next step, but that's fine. It'll try again next time your users visit your page. If it does install successfully, you'll know you've got those static assets in the cache. So after the installation step, we have the activation step, which is when you might handle the management of old caches. And after the activation step, the service worker can control all the pages that fall under the scope that you set. It'll then be able to handle fetch messages and message events. And as I said earlier, service workers offer us the potential to create an offline experience. But we need to think about what kind of offline experience that might be. And we can use different caching strategies to make this decision easier. So, if you've got a site that is unlikely to be updated too much, you could maybe use a cache-first approach, where you will fall back to the network if there's nothing in the cache. If you've got a lot of updates, for example, a breaking news feed, which wants to be as up-to-date as possible, but also show the most recent data if the user is offline, then maybe we could use a network-first approach to take data from the cache if the user loses connectivity. When you just want to get something to the user as quickly as possible, you might want to use the network cache race approach, which will show whichever responds first, which would usually be the cache, but maybe your user's got a very slow device. And what it'll do is it'll update the cache with the new data when it gets the data from the network. And if there's no way that you ever want to serve data from the cache, then you could use a network-only approach and maybe show a "you're offline" warning when the user is offline. And when you've made a static site that you're not planning on changing, then you could use the cache-only approach, where you save data to the cache on the first visit, and then always serve from the cache on subsequent visits. Obviously, some of these you're going to use more often than others. And I've seen some really lovely examples of different use cases for offline experiences, from being able to, save your favorite podcast to listen to later, showing articles that have been saved with a read later option, or just even showing a more pleasant offline message than the browser default. I mean, as much as we love the little offlinosaur, you know what I'm talking about when I say offlinosaur, the little dinosaur that's in the Chrome. I mean, I love it, but it can be very confusing to users, especially those who are a little bit less au fait with the internet. They're trying to reach your website, and they've been presented with the dinosaur game. It's kind of confusing. Like, did they get the URL wrong? Did they open the wrong app? Being given a branded offline page at least lets them know that they're in the right place. And if you want to be able to debug what your service worker is doing, then both Chrome and Firefox offer useful debugging tools in the browser. So here's the Chrome application tab, which you can find under service workers. And you can see your registered service workers there. You can see their status, and you can unregister them and update them, and you can even emulate a push event from the Chrome tab. Firefox also has some tools. So if you visit About Debugging and click on the Workers tab, then you'll be able to unregister your service worker and simulate a push event. So this has been a pretty whirlwind tour, and I've not gone into much detail of anything, so if you're feeling overwhelmed, don't worry. There are loads of tools online to help you. If you want help on how to get a website that you already own set up and run as a PWA, then there are multiple tools available to you. So of course we've got Lighthouse, which you will find under the Audits tab in Chrome Inspect, which will give you a checklist of actions you need to take in order to make your website a PWA. SonarWall is a linting tool which will help you improve your site's performance, accessibility, security, which are all important steps to make your PWA the best that it can be. We want it to be that progressive part of progressive web apps. And there's a tool called PWA Builder, which will help you to build a manifest, a service worker, even icons to make your site into a PWA. They have a literal step-by-step form. You put all your data in, and it'll generate you a manifest and a service worker. It'll even make multiple icons for you if you upload one image. So one thing that we've not talked about yet is push notifications. So what about them? If we've got a registered service worker, we're now able to send push notifications. And push notifications aren't a requirement for being recognized as a progressive web app, but they are a really great example of a native app feature coming to the web. And when used carefully, they can be really important to provide that user engagement that we all really want. They're timely, informative messages from your app to your user, timely and informative being the very important words here. So push notifications rely on service worker support, plus two other APIs, the notification API and the push API. The notification API is what's used to display the messages, and the push API to handle the push messages from the server. Yeah, in order to send push notifications, we have to get permission from the user first, which requires the notification.requestPermission call. And that's what that's going to do is display an allow deny prompt to the user, which you've probably all likely seen in your journeys around the internet. Once you have permission, you can then send notifications with text and an icon and an option to play a vibration pattern on the phone if you want to. And because service workers aren't tied to the lifeline of the browser, the lifetime of the browser tab, you can give your user actions to follow without even having to open the app. They could interact with your app without even having the app open. And sure, browser support isn't everywhere yet. We don't have the push API in Safari, but the browser devices that don't support push notifications just won't show them, and that's okay. That's the whole progressive part of progressive web apps. But what about support for service workers themselves? Let's have a look. So with the recent announcements from Safari and from Edge, the Can I Use graph is actually looking a lot more green than it used to. It's not bad. So we can use service workers in all of these browsers. And okay, sure, PWAs aren't supported everywhere yet, but the whole point of progressive web apps is that they're progressive. By adding the enhancements necessary to make your site a PWA, you're improving the user experience for those users on older browsers too. You're improving the accessibility, you're improving the performance. All these things are really great for your users, especially if you're using that the Lighthouse tool in the Chrome tab. It's going to give you a whole load of examples of things that you can change, that you can make better. Making these steps towards making your app a PWA is going to make it better for everybody. And the browsers that do support the PWA technology will give the users these extra features that you want. For example, we have things like ambient badging and save to home screen notifications. So let's take a look at what they look like. So here we've got Chrome's save to home screen notification and Samsung Internet's ambient badging, which you can see up the top there. Also of note here, a thing that I quite like is that the color of the navigation icons in the bottom of Samsung Internet will match the color that you set in the manifest for your UI. So they'll actually change the colors of the icons to match your app. Now, they both allow the user to download the app to their home screen, but it's worth noting that as of a couple of months ago, Chrome changed the automatic showing of this add to home screen. So you're going to have to trigger it yourself using the before install prompt event. It won't happen automatically. And the reason for this is that we're starting to make our users feel a bit like this. So this was a tweet that I saw a few months ago. And I'm pretty certain we've all felt like this. And as developers, we need to be considerate of our users. We only want to ask them for extra engagement if they're already showing interest. So Samsung Internet won't show you the ambient badging until you've visited the PWA at least 3 times. And Chrome now requires you to add the Save to Home Screen button in yourself. Remember, we want to be the heroes of the web, not the villains. We want to make this a lovely place to be. We want to make using our products a nice experience. And while we're on the topic of notification spam, I'm going to go on a little rant. So service workers give us the power to send push notifications, but asking users for permission to send notifications the instant that your users arrive on your site for the first time is not being the hero. That's being the villain. It's an anti-pattern. You want your users to trust you enough to send them notifications about your content that they actually want. You don't want to ask them that before they've even had a chance to find out who you are yet. And if we, as developers, don't start behaving responsibly with regards to notifications, then the browsers are going to take them away from us. Firefox has just announced that as of Firefox 59, they're giving users a tool to block sites from ever showing notifications. And this is coming from users who are saying, we're fed up with seeing notifications. I don't want them ever. And that's because we're bombarding our users. It's so important that we give our users a chance to get to know our content so that they can be informed about whether or not they want to hear more from us. Then you can politely suggest that maybe they might want to hear more from you at other times. Giving information on why you feel that push notifications are necessary is also really useful to your users. Instantly leaping on them while they're unsuspecting is what the baddies do. It's going to make them frustrated with you and not engaged. Build up that trust and loyalty first before you go bursting in there with notifications. So, what's next? You've written your PWA, you've got a manifest and a service worker, you're serving it over HTTPS, your users can find your site, they can download it to the home screen, and that's great. But what else is there? What else is great about PWAs? Well, have a quick think about how you would normally find an app. You'd go to the App Store, right? Users have gotten used to the idea that if they want an app, they search for it in an app store. And this behavior is something that we can't ignore if we want users to find our apps. Luckily, many of the app store providers have started support for PWAs in their store. And sure, there are a few hoops to jump through with each store as far as packaging the app goes. And for some of them, you'll have to spend some money to actually get it into the store. But there is an excellent tool called PWA Builder, which I mentioned before, which will help you out with this packaging. Also, to be able to develop for the App Store on iOS, you're going to need a machine that can run Xcode, which means that you'll need access to a Mac or a VM of some kind, which is an extra expense that I just feel like I have to mention. But Windows are putting in a real effort for making apps, PWAs, get into their store as easily as possible. And they're bringing out soon the Bing crawler, which is going to automatically index any PWAs that it finds. And it's going to put them in the Windows Store, which for us as developers is amazing. Imagine you build a PWA, and it turns up in the store without you ever having to actually do anything. They've got a whole load of helpful advice online about what constitutes a quality PWA, which is what your PWA needs in order to be put in the store. But yeah, they really want to help you get there. So visit Microsoft's site on PWAs in order to find out more about that. With PWAs, you now have the combined discoverability powers of both the web and the app stores, and that's not all. Oh, there we go. There's another link to PWA Builder. PWAs can be installed and work from your desktop. They're not only for mobile devices. This is what we talked about when we said they had to be responsive. Chrome currently offers the ability to install PWAs to your machine, adding another shortcut to the desktop, which is launchable as you would any other application on your machine. And apps installed from the Windows or iOS store will also be installable on your machine. You'll be able to add the icons to your start menu, app menu, desktop, wherever you prefer, just like any other application. And if you've got a Samsung DeX, which is the device that allows you to connect your phone to a monitor and keyboard and mouse, you'll be able to use the PWAs that you know and love from your phone in a desktop environment. So I hope you're all convinced about the benefits of making a PWA, and will consider building one as an option next time you think, maybe we need an app for that. And if you're convinced, but you're worried that maybe you might need help convincing your product or your business colleagues, then take a look at pwastats.com, which is this website here. It's a list of real-life stats from people in our community who've made their site into progressive web apps. And it shows the improvements that they've seen with regards to performance, to accessibility, to engagement, to revenue, to file size, to conversion, you name it. And with the excellent browser support, the advantages in cost and dev time and the potential gains to performance and accessibility and usability, there really isn't a better time to get starting a PWA. And remember, go PWA Rangers. Thank you very much. I think we have time for some questions if anybody has any. If not, rush to the front and get stickers. And do feel free to ask me questions while you're getting stickers.